Jane here from Crystals and More. I'm going to walk you through a really simple weave. Well, not so simple, it's a bit of fiddling around, but it's loads of fun. You're going to really enjoy it. And I want to take you through everything from drawing up your base pattern to ironing it and completing it. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to show you how to make a bias strip. Keeping in mind with meshwork, we don't cut on the bias, we do it straight on the grain. The only time you have to do on the bias is if it's got to be pliable. With meshwork, it's all straight line, so straight on the grain's fine. Now, I'm just going to cut my fabric at 3/4 of an inch because I'm going to show you how to use a 3/8 bias tape maker, and you always cut it twice the width. Now, I'm using my wonderful ultimate ruler. The big advantage in using the ultimate ruler is you are cutting on the fabric straight down. Even when you're doing fold after fold on the bias, you are cutting on top of the pole, not leaning against the edge of the pole. And when you are working on the bias, you have to add a 1/16 or an 1/8 of an inch. With this ruler, it makes it very, very easy. If I was cutting for a 1/4 inch tape maker, actually I'll cut one now. Instead of cutting in 1/2 an inch, because the reason you cut wider at on the bias is as it goes through the tape maker, it stretches. So you're going to be cutting a 1/2 inch strip. A 1/2 inch strip is going to stretch regardless. So when I do it, I add a 1/16 of an inch. So I take it up to the next little increment there and slice it through. And that's where these rulers are brilliant. The multiple cut rulers are a problem from the fact that they're at 1/2 inch, 1 inch, 1 1/2, 2 inches, but we need to be able to add on the tiniest little amount. So now, I'm going to get start again. I'm going to show you how to make a bias tape. All I've done, as I say, I've cut this at 3/4 of an inch because I'm going to show you how to use the 3/8 of an inch tape maker. Cut it to a point, makes it easier to thread. You feed it through with the fabric right side up. Now at that point you could iron it and make bias binding, but we're in the fusible web. This is the 5mm fusible web. You use the 5mm fusible web for the 1/4 inch and the 3/8 of an inch, and then you use a 10mm for the rest of it. Pause again, George. Now, you just pin it in there. Make sure your strip is straight, make sure your tape's straight, and then you iron on. Now, when I'm working at the shows, I use a little mini iron. It's not necessary to have a mini iron. The reason I have a mini iron there is because it's small and it's easier on the table. But if I'm at home, I always use my iron, full-size iron. This wonderful little iron here is a $9 Kmart iron. It's quite small, not much bigger than a craft iron anyway, and it costs $9. So why waste money on a product you really don't need? Don't go out and buy a mini iron, not for this anyway. So we've made our tapes. So you can see how simple the tapes are. What I usually do, I'll make all my strips one day and then the next day I'll go in to do my weaving. Now, so that's making your tape. I'm going to show you now how to draw up your base pattern. With meshwork, there's always got to be a piece of fabric, a piece of paper underneath with lines on it to keep your meshwork straight, and it's just a base pattern. Now, the pattern I'm going to show you today is a 60-degree pattern. So I've already drawn it up as a 9-inch square. Always draw up your paper to whatever size you want your block to end up, or even if you're doing a handbag pattern or anything that's anything that you like. Even I did my grandson's christening gown. The pattern I wanted to replace with meshwork, you photocopy it, draw lines on it, put baking paper over the top, weave it, fuse it, and then just cut it out like a piece of fabric. So yeah, so it just depends on which one you're doing as to how you do it. Now for this particular one, as I say, I've decided I want a 9-inch block. I've drawn that on my paper already. Now I'm lining up my ruler with a 60-degree angle, and I'm doing a line going across like that. And from then on, all I do is just, it doesn't matter how far apart your lines are, because these are only just to keep you straight. I just line up one of the markers on the ruler, and your lines, and this is really important, have to extend beyond your work, because otherwise when you do your first row on, you're not going to see where you've got to put your next. So it is So always have your lines extending beyond your work. Now, so all I'm doing is just lining up the 2.5 inch line there, and there's my lines that way. Now, a 60-degree angle for the other side, all you do is turn it around to that angle. There we go, line up with the bottom of your page again, and there's our 60 degrees. Same thing again, just line up any mark you want to, doesn't matter which one, just as long as the line all the way along is on top of the line you've already drawn, it's going to be straight. Now each time you get up to these lines while you're working, you're just going to adjust your pinning so that you work straight. George is my cameraman today, so every now and then I might break into wifey mode and start yelling at him. Just ignore it. It's a normal day with Anne and George.
Wait till she gets the bill.
Right, we're just about done. Last line. So there we go. So we've got 60 degrees. Then, now even with your mat, I obviously would have hundreds of mats in all different shapes and sizes. There are very expensive mats you can buy. They're around the $100 mark, but there's a cheaper alternative to that too. This is just a piece of timber with a bit of ironing board felt on top, and with a hot glue gun I just pinned it all on, glued it all on. So now, so there's my base pattern, and I'm just pinning it on. Keep in mind to always pin towards the middle of your work. Don't pin all different angles, because you need strength in that pinning, because when you're coming through from the other side doing your second layer, you are going to need it to be strong. So it's always pinning down and under towards the middle of your work. So there's the first row. Now, I'm going to show you, this is the first time I've done this pattern, so we're going to do this in stages. I've got 3 different widths. I'm doing them 60 degrees. You always do your longest length first. Reason being, when you're getting further and further through it, your leftovers, short strips, can be used in the shorter areas. So all you do is you take up the slack on your strips. You don't pull on them. Pull it up, tighten it. The next one's going to be this blue. Now, once again, side by side, if you can keep it probably almost touching, not quite touching, is best, or they can touch, but not really tight. It's really important that they're not squashed up, because you've got to allow space for the other ones to come through. And if they're really bunched up close, it's not going to happen. So, now, also, if you've got leftover strips, they do store best with the paper still on. And if you've managed to pull them off all their paper and you want to store them still, just iron them onto a bit of baking paper and then roll it up. You can still do it that way, so you don't waste them. Because you'd be amazed at how many things I have made where I have used a different colour in it and it's just been left over from something else. So we're going to do that, repeat it all the way along. Just small, medium, large, all the way along. Don't forget you reduce it as you go into the corners. And as I said before, the reason it is really important for your lines to extend beyond your work, because otherwise you're not going to have a hope of seeing where to put your next row. So, and you use strong glass head pins, not really expensive, beautiful glass head pins. The problem with the beautiful, expensive glass head pins is they're very fine, which makes them very weak. And we treat them pretty badly doing this, so they need to be quite strong. So cheap nasty is fabulous. So, and dark. Okay, so I'm not going to do too much of this. You can see what it is, just repeating this all the way along. You just pin it on, so just a little bit past the pin line. And you remember to reduce it as you're going up the sides. So that's basically it. So here's one I prepared earlier. Oh. Change that one over for this one. Now, you can see that line I was doing there, which is the small, medium, large, all the way across. Now, the next step was coming through from the other side, and we're just going over one and under one. It's very, very simple. So where am I up to? I've got large, medium, small, large, so it's a little purpley doodah. And with your bodkin, you just pinch it on the end, slide the ring down, and there it is. So we're going to be under the first one. What I'm going to do after I do this, I'm going to show you a whole lot of variations on this weave and just how different they can look with only a slight change in it. It doesn't have to be anything dramatic. And if the pin's in the right place, take it out and just reuse it. I find if I go through a few, then pin it, you don't have the risk of getting carried away and pulling it all the way through when you get to the end. And make sure you adjust your pinning when you get up to each of these little lines, because that's what they're there for, the little guidelines there. So,
11 minutes.
Right, so we're going to keep on doing that. And I thought I would only have a little bit more to do on this, but it's not working as quickly as I thought. So I'm just under there and over. And I think you can see what I'm doing. It's not rocket science. I'm just going over the next one and over the other one, under the other one. I'm going to, because we do have limited time and I really want to show you other things, I'm going to get George to pause and then I'll show you some other things when we get to the end. Now I've just gone up to I'm coming up to the corner here. I wanted to show you one thing that's very handy. Remember that you don't need, what am I doing? It's stuck. It says this one. It's too hard to go under these. So 9 times out of 10, when you get to the corners, instead of going under them, I just unpick, tuck it under. Don't try and do it with a bodkin, it's just too hard. And like that. I hope you can see around my hands. It's a little bit hard, but there's not much I can do. Now another little piece of the glue. Okay. Normally I would put another little piece in there. Oh, George just found me a piece. So he's not totally useless. It's only a rumour I've been spreading. Now, just tuck that under there again. Sorry about my hands being in the way. Just tucking it under, and it's a little bit gappy there, so I'm just pushing that down. You don't want gaps if you can help it, because it'll actually show through. Oh, pardon me, I'm allergic to my own work. Okay, so that's it basically. Now what I do now, check it for cat fur. Everything in my house gets covered in cat fur. Check for your gaps. Rub your hands over it. It relaxes all the strips, and they're bunching anywhere, it'll relax them. Just make sure there's no fur on them. There's a little bit gaps in places. It'll be fine. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to iron it down. Ironing it, and that's the reason we use glass head pins, because we're ironing this down, pins and all. And this is only a temporary iron, because when we take the pins out, we're going to give it a really, really good iron. But it needs to be ironed at this point so we can take the pins out. Now when you're taking the pins out, one of the things that's really important, you have to support each of your strips. It is because they're cheap, nasty glass head pins, they're also thick. And they will actually pull a strip out the middle of your work quick as a flash. And that's usually when you sit down and cry. So not a good idea to do that. Okay, so I've done that. That's my temporary iron. So, as I say, when you're taking your pins out, you put your fingers on the strips and take your pins out that way. But make sure you've got your fingers on there because seriously, and I've done it. I've been doing this for 100 years. And recently, I pulled a strip right out of the middle of a lady's work. Wasn't pleased. She was not at all pleased, but never mind. Okay, so we'll do that. Now,
I've paused it.
Yeah, good, I was about to say that.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm just taking the last of the pins out and we're going to give it a really good iron now. And this is where you want to be a little bit careful because I've got a lovely piece that ladies often comment on how nice the colours are. In actual fact, not all those colours should be there. Some of them are scorch marks. So, and there's frequently a little pin tucked under, so be a little bit careful. So, now, okay. Now, if you want to check to make sure you haven't got pins in, the best way of checking is not to move the work. Because if there is a pin, you'll just pull the strip out of the middle of your work. You move your paper. And that's why you move your paper. Where is it? Ah, there we go. There's a pin hiding away. Okay, there we go. So, now I'm going to lift it off. It likes to stick to the paper. And that's when you check to make sure you've taken all the paper off all your strips, and we have. Now I'm going to iron it onto a piece of fabric that I had here a moment ago. Oh, okay, bear with me a second. I'm just going to take a bit off this one.
Filming.
Right, so here's my little bit of scrap fabric. Just ironing it to make sure there's no creases in it. We don't want any extra creases in it. Now, put this back on mat with a fusible web up. Then you put your fabric back on and you iron it. Now you'd be amazed at how well it sticks to that fabric. It's not remotely fragile, it's actually quite robust and quite tight. Just make sure you've got all of it and you'll be amazed at how well it sticks. Okay, and what we're going to do then is just trim it up and we'll look at it. Now, come down this end a little bit so I can use my cutting mat with my patterns, and bear with me while I grab a ruler which seems to have walked. Press pause, George. Oh no, there's my ruler, that's fine. Now, this ruler is my favourite. I designed it, so I'm more than a little bit biased. Make sure it's in. It just makes life a lot easier if you're doing a lot of strips. So I'm doing now trimming it up to make sure it's nice and square. I find the cutting mat's the easiest way of gauging that. So line up that to make sure it's square there. And if you've got a ruler, if you find that your ruler slips on you, you shouldn't just have your hand on the ruler, have it on the fabric as well. And then you know it's not going to go anywhere. And there it is. So I think that's pretty wonderful. I've never done that before. It's a very interesting little pattern. Now, what I want to show you though, I'm going to get out of the light, is some variations on it. Now that was done at 60 degrees. Oops. All of these are 60 degrees, over one and under one, just playing around with colours and widths. This is using 3 different widths, over one and under one, whereas that one's 3 widths, but 3 different colours as well. it just depends on how you want to lay them out. The thing is just to play. Now, if I had have done that under 2 and over 2 instead of under 1 and over 1, I would have had very similar to this, but only with a stronger, a tighter weave, closer I should say. If I only did 2 colours, we would have that little herringbone, but only, yeah, that's 45 degrees, it would just be at 60 degrees. It's amazing what you can do just playing around with your widths and colours. So, as I say, very similar, but they could look totally different just by playing around with your colours and widths. Like I could have used 5 different widths, 5 different colours, and instead of doing it at 60 degrees, done it at 45 degrees. So the trick is to play. It is so much fun. So keep in mind, I haven't made kits because there's not much point. You may have tools, you may have all of these things at home. Basically, if you need anything, order online, or if you have any questions, don't hesitate to email me, ring me. It is a great fun craft, and I want you to really have a lot of fun with it. And after this video is finished, I will be online, and actually, this is going to sound really weird. I have been online watching myself all the way through this, and if you wanted to, you could have asked me questions, which it does my head in a little bit thinking about how that works. So anyway, you've got about 5 or 10 minutes where we can just discuss things. Feel free. So I really want you to have some fun with this. Don't forget you can use it for dressmaking, handbags, anything you want, but play. It's so much fun. There's no such thing as a mistake. It's just a new design. Okay, thanks for being here with me, and don't hesitate to ask me any questions you like. Bye.